Here we go. Alrighty, we are recording. So thank you very much, Megan, for giving our network this kind of Zoom tutorial demonstration on how to teach other folks to Zoom. So take it away.
Thank you, Amanda, and good morning to everyone who's on the call and everyone who might be watching a recording of this tutorial. I hope that this will be something that is beneficial and that you can bring into your community to use with your clients. So I wanted to title this Zoom for Community Engagement, because this is really geared towards those of us who are working in nonprofits and in churches and in other community atmosphere where we can bring our participants together virtually.
Espero que esto pueda serle de bastante utilidad para usarse en la comunidad, organizaciones, iglesias. Eso es importante para usar el Zoom para una herramienta virtual en la comunidad. Megan McDermott está presentando el día de hoy. Gracias.
Okay, so as we've transitioned to this time where so much of our connection is virtual throughout the pandemic, a lot of people have responded differently. And I don't want to stereotype any particular community, but I know especially some of the older adults that I've worked with, when I tell them, oh, our programs are now virtual, there's an immediate hesitation. Not from everyone, some are incredibly fluent in using technology, but a lot are having a hard time learning and adapting to new ways of using this. And so one of the best ways that I've found is one-on-one coaching through how to go into a Zoom meeting. And so that's what I'm going to teach you guys to do today with your participants. So we want them to not feel excluded. So many people, they hear that word virtual and they think, I'm not invited to this because I'm not a technology person. And we really want to break down that barrier.
Una de las principales barreras que tenemos en el tiempo de la pandemia es que las actividades tienen que hacerse virtuales. Megan McDermott no quiere hacer estereotipos acerca de ciertos tipos de grupos sociales, pero las personas de la tercera edad pueden tener diferentes reacciones, pueden estar de acuerdo, pueden tener tecnología, conocimientos de esa tecnología y entrar en las llamadas de una manera perfecta o batallar un poco. Megan les va a explicar a través de este proceso cómo pueden trabajar con ellos de uno a uno para tratar de resolver las dudas tecnológicas que puedan tener.
So this is the flowchart that I've created and that I've been using with most of our participants. I know it looks really chaotic when you first look at it, but throughout this presentation, we're going to walk through this entire flowchart. And I encourage you guys, I can send out this resource right here and you can personalize it for your meetings. You can put your logo up there, your contact information, and the meeting ID right here where you just see X's. You can put in the specific meeting ID and the time and place of your program. So I'm happy to share this resource. It's been a great way to kind of coach people through the flow chart. But one of the most important questions we're going to ask is, how are you joining? And I'm going to go through that in a sec, but there's kind of three distinct ways, whether you're joining from a smartphone or tablet, a computer, or a landline, and you're going to dial in. And this resource is also available in Spanish.
Este recurso está disponible. Megan desarrolló un croquis o un diagrama de las diferentes maneras en las que usted puede entrar. Tal vez se vea algo confuso, pero si miran a los elementos se van a dar cuenta que hay tres maneras: por Zoom en la computadora, por teléfono y la aplicación del Zoom. Cada una explica, y esto puede compartirse de Megan a otras organizaciones para que puedan implementarlo de una manera más amigable.
Okay, so the first thing that you're going to want to do, if you have a participant who'd like to learn how to join a meeting, I recommend starting a meeting. I usually use my personal meeting ID, so you start your personal meeting room, or you could just set up a meeting and invite the participant to it. This will be great because the participant is not just receiving instructions, but they're actually walking through the same steps that they would use to join the meeting. Sometimes I will also just, for example, if it's a meeting next Tuesday and I've already created that Zoom link, I'll then encourage the participant just to join that meeting ahead of time. But in order for the participant to join the meeting has to start, which means you have to be in the meeting. So typically one of the first things that I do is I'll start that meeting up so that as they're actually walking through the steps of joining, they'll be able to join this meeting. So here you see all of the information. I'm hoping that most of you are familiar with setting up a Zoom meeting. If you've never used Zoom at all before, there's some great tutorials on the Zoom website that can kind of walk you through how to get this far. But once you are this far, you've got all the information right here. And you might want to share that with the participant who you're going to walk through this tutorial. If they text or use email, it's great if you could send them the meeting ID, which you see right here at the top, or also down here where it says meeting ID, or you've got the link and all the information here.
Una de las maneras que Megan ha estado implementando colaboraciones con las personas en reuniones virtuales es mediante empezando una reunión sin hacerla en el calendario. Es decir, usted en Zoom en cualquier momento puede empezar una reunión cuando usted guste y compartir ese ID con las personas para que participan. Otra manera es haciéndola en el calendario de manera avanzada, con anticipación. Una manera importante es recordarle a las personas que entren con tiempo de anticipación en caso de que haya problemas tecnológicos y no puedan entrar. Usted puede ofrecer tutoría individual para que ellos puedan entrar. Y otra cosa importante, mirando este email que tiene las indicaciones de cómo entrar, es algo confuso, pero sin embargo hay tutoriales en zoom.us donde usted puede encontrar paso a paso cómo se puede hacer una reunión.
Okay, so now say I'm doing a walkthrough with an individual. Typically this is going on over the phone, obviously. It'd be super easy if I was sitting next to them, but we've adapted it so that we can coach them through it. And the first question I want to know is how are they going to join the meeting? And so obviously, as we saw on that flow chart, it could be a phone, a landline, or an old-fashioned flip phone. It could be a smartphone, a tablet, so that'd be an Android, an iPhone, an iPad, anything like that. Or if they're joining from a computer, a laptop or desktop.
So, hay maneras diferentes. Escribiendo, volviendo al diagrama, usted puede entrar por teléfono en un teléfono antiguo de que no es teléfono inteligente. Puede entrar por la línea fija, puede también entrar por la computadora, la tablet, o puede entrar con un dispositivo con internet.
So let's start off with one of the most basic ways. A lot of our programming, we're working with some older community members who are preferring to join from their landline. And so this is probably one of the simplest ways to get into the meeting, especially for those who say, I don't understand technology. Maybe they have a really strong aversion to it, or maybe they don't have access to internet or a computer. So this is one of the simpler ways to join. I instruct them to always dial this number, 312-626-6799. That number will be the same for all meetings. That's the number to dial Zoom. It's specific to the Chicago area, but it will work from just about anywhere. The quality is just best from the Chicago area. And then once they've dialed that, they're going to be prompted to enter the meeting ID. And that meeting ID is going to be specific to your meeting. So remember when I showed the personal meeting room and it had that meeting ID, or if you've started the meeting for the upcoming event, it's going to be a unique, usually 9 or 10-digit code. So they're going to enter that followed by the pound sign, and it'll ask them to enter the meeting ID followed by pound. Then it will ask them for their participant ID. And if they don't have a participant ID, which unless they're joining to connect their computer audio with the phone, they will just press pound.
Es algo muy importante, un elemento muy básico para personas que no pueden usar el internet, no tienen acceso o conocimiento, es por la línea telefónica. El número 312 es un número local de Chicago. Puede trabajar en el área conurbada de Chicago perfectamente desde un celular o una línea fija. Recuerde que el Meeting ID se encuentra en el email o las notas que se le mandan a usted. Es un número de 9 dígitos seguido del símbolo de gato, el cual es necesario poner para entrar. Si le preguntan por un ID, un participante ID, y usted no sabe dónde obtenerlo, solo presione otra vez el símbolo de gato para poder usar la voz, la función de voz por teléfono.
One additional note, I didn't put it in the slides, but sometimes if a participant has trouble with mute on the phone, I believe the code is *6 that they can dial to mute and unmute themselves from the phone. sometimes participants get in a rut where they get muted and they can't unmute themselves. So that's just a good thing to keep in mind if someone is having trouble with that.
Megan menciona algo muy importante. Si usted está hablando y nadie lo oye, nadie le pone atención, presione *6 cuando esté por teléfono. De esa manera puede hablar con voz para las demás personas. *6.
And so just a reminder, here it shows where the meeting ID would be located. That's what the participant is going to enter after dialing. And then also just that number that I gave you before should always be right here on your meeting invitation. When they're dialing from a landline, obviously they might not think about this, but they won't have video capacity, especially if their phone might have a screen like an old-fashioned flip phone, but it's just going to sound like a normal phone call. So that's one of the downsides of joining from a landline or from an older phone, but nonetheless, you can have great capacity to do what's more like a conference call.
Una de las desventajas de unirse por teléfono es que no va a tener video, va a ser una llamada regular. Tome en cuenta, sin embargo, que puede ser muy accesible si usted no sabe usar la tecnología. Mire las flechas, como menciona el Meeting ID, la reunión de el identificador de la cita está arriba y el teléfono es el primero donde menciona Chicago. Eso es la información que va a necesitar cada vez que marque por teléfono.
Okay, so now we're going to take it up a notch. We've gone through one of the most basic ways of joining, and next we're going to walk through using a smartphone or a tablet. So like I said before, these are your Android phones, iPhones, an iPad, or another equivalent tablet. And this also goes for a Chromebook. I know we might think of that as a laptop, but the functionality, you need to download the app. So this is all going to be through the Zoom app. And the first question you're going to ask the participant is, do you have the Zoom app? Some of them might have used it in the past, so they might already have it downloaded, which makes your job easier. But if not, you're going to walk through how to download that app from the App Store if they're using an Apple product, or Google Play for most other products.
Entonces, la manera muy importante aquí, bueno, una manera más fácil es siguiendo el smartphone y de la tableta. Usted tiene que primero cerciorarse que exista la aplicación en su teléfono. En caso que no exista en iPhone, iPad, hay algo que se llama el App Store. Es una aplicación que le permite bajar esa misma aplicación de manera gratis. Y el Google Play, si tiene Android o tiene acceso a teléfono que tenga dispositivo Android, el Google Play es donde puede bajarlo sin costo alguno. Ahora, importante saber que si no tiene la aplicación, no se va a cargar la junta. O sea, tiene que cerciorarse que lo tenga instalado. Thanks.
So this is just quickly how to download the application. This is specific for the App Store. I'm not as familiar with Google Play because I don't have any devices that use it, but it's a generally similar process where they're going to open up the store and they're going to search for Zoom Cloud Meetings. And the icon, I usually let them know it should be a blue icon with an old-fashioned video camcorder on it. And then beside it, they should see an icon that either looks like a cloud. That's only if they've had the app in the past. More likely, it's going to say the word get. It's a free app, but you will need, at least for the Apple Store, you'll need an Apple ID and password. So that can be difficult for some folks who might not have made an account in the past or might not remember it. There's some workarounds, but I don't want to get into the details of that during this call. You're just going to instruct them to download it, and hopefully they'll have that set up. If not, try to help them create an ID and password to use the store.
Megan, just to quickly piggyback to what you have to say real quickly here. When you get your iPhone on Android, you should have that account. You should be automatically logged in. So I don't think that should be a problem, but thanks for that reminder. So
I know my dad always has that problem. He can never remember the password.
Yes, you can remember passwords, but you can always reset, follow the steps. So, en esta video, en esta flecha, muestra cómo en la parte izquierda superior de la pantalla muestra un símbolo de una cámara antigua azul que menciona Zoom Cloud Meetings. Es el logotipo de la aplicación y eso indica que es la aplicación correcta. El símbolo de la nube, de la flecha apunta hacia abajo, es como bajarla en caso de que usted tenga un iPhone. Si usted tiene un Google Play como yo, puede usar el Google Play en la parte inferior de su teléfono o buscar en Search, buscar Play hacer clic en el icono Google Play y después entrar ahí y el botón va a ser similar a Get. Es un botón verde Get y entonces cuando termine le va a avisar que está instalada y entonces va a poder entrar a la junta. Puede ser algo difícil a tratar de recuperar su contraseña. Le recomiendo que verifique en Google Play o Apple Store que tenga acceso antes de bajar la aplicación.
Okay, so once they've downloaded that, you're going to tell them on their main screen to look for that same blue icon that they saw in the store and open that up. And when they see that and open it, they're going to see this screen on the left that's going to instruct them to start a meeting or join a video meeting. So they're then going to want to press the main blue button that says join a meeting. That will lead them into the second screen on the right, where they will be asked to put that meeting ID in. That's the same 9 to 11 digit ID code that we've been talking about that's unique to this meeting. And then they'll be prompted to enter a screen name, which is what everyone will see when they join the meeting. So they might want to put their first name. They may want to include the pronouns that they prefer. They might just want to include last initial or full name, whatever they prefer. And then once they've entered those 2 pieces of information, they're going to press join and they'll be in the meeting.
So, esta es la manera que se muestra cuando usted abre la aplicación de Zoom la primera vez. Usted tiene que prestar atención que para empezar la junta va a hacer clic en el botón azul llamado Join a Meeting. Este botón le va a permitir acceder al menú de la derecha que dice Join a Meeting. Aquí en Join a Meeting le preguntan el Meeting ID, el cual vio en el correo de la pantalla anterior que se mostró el identificador de la junta. Ponerlo en el primer campo y en el segundo campo va a poder poner su primer nombre si está a gusto solo poner su primer nombre. No necesita poner su apellido. Si desea poner pronombres o cualquier información relevante lo puede hacer. Esto es opcional, sin embargo recomendamos que use el primer nombre. Y finalmente va a usar el botón donde dice Join. Me gustaría recalcarles que donde dice Do not connect to audio, ahí básicamente puede desactivar su micrófono o turn off my video. En caso de que no quiera que se active la cámara, Megan, I'm translating into Spanish and English, basically means turn off your video. Is that if you are not comfortable being seen during the meeting, go ahead and activate that slide bar. Again, in the microphone, if you are not comfortable participating too, you can activate so that will disconnect your microphone. But you will be able to unmute yourself or turn your video during the meeting though.
Yep, that's a great point, Jesus. So before joining, you can eliminate your video and or audio depending on your preferences. And then I don't have a slide that shows what it looks like once you join, but you'll also have a bar that'll have a button for a microphone to control your mute and video. I'll show that later when we talk about joining from the computer, but you can control all that in the meeting as well.
Megan, I'll piggyback really quickly here. Megan, for example, could be a host and could be able to control people, microphones and video. So there will always be somebody that assisting you for tech issues. So again, de la misma manera, si usted no desactiva estas opciones, después el host, el anfitrión puede activar su video, preguntarle para activarlo. So de eso no hay problema, pero es opcional. Thank you.
Okay, so now we've gone through joining from a landline or an old-fashioned phone. We've gone through smartphones and tablets. So the last and probably the most complicated is going to be joining from a computer. And this will really be one where you'll have to understand your participants' level of understanding for using a computer. For example, you might need to instruct them how to open a browser, or they might be super familiar with doing that already. So there's, just like asking before whether or not they had the app, we need to know if they have the Zoom program software downloaded or not. So that'll help us to walk them through it appropriately because it's slightly different, and I'll show that in a bit. So there's several different options you have here. They can join from a browser, which is going to be the easiest way. They won't have to download anything. They won't have to make an account. Or if they're feeling a little more comfortable, they can download that software and or they can make an account.
So esta es la manera, suena una manera muy fácil de una computadora, pero realmente no lo es. Es una manera muy difícil aún así, porque tiene que bajar una aplicación o sobre el browser solamente, pero la mayoría de las personas obviamente tienen que sentirse a gusto para poder bajar la aplicación. Depende del tipo de browser que tenga y de la habilidad para entrar. Y también obviamente tenga en cuenta que necesita probablemente tenerlo instalado. Como menciona en el pie de página ahí, dice algunos dispositivos no le van a permitir entrar desde un browser. Chromebook, por ejemplo, es una computadora económica de Google que no le va a permitir, pero generalmente en la mayoría de los casos, si usted tiene Windows, por ejemplo, le va a permitir entrar al store y bajar el Zoom, la aplicación de Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus. Okay, so like I mentioned, there's that somewhat simple way to join. Hopefully going through this presentation, I'm going to be sharing these slides so you can have this in front of you while you might be on the phone with a participant, which takes it step by step and really breaks it down into something a lot more simple. But so without an account and without downloading the software, they can join from within the browser. Like Jesus mentioned before in Spanish, it really does depend on what their browser is. I'm most familiar with using Google Chrome, and I recommend that if they have it downloaded. Internet Explorer can be tricky, as well as Firefox or Safari, but usually you can manipulate it to get it to let them join from a browser. And so you're going to encourage them from that browser to search in the search bar for zoom.us/join. Or if you want to take them directly to bypass the step where they enter the meeting ID, you can use that link that was on that page that we talked about that has the phone numbers and the meeting ID and everything, which will have the meeting link where it has X's here will be in at the end of the link, and that'll bypass the step where they have to enter the meeting link. So either one.
Just to piggyback here really quickly again, I know we send flyers as hosting parts of the the host of workshops. We send links in that way, like the bottom HTTPS zoom.xxx. We do that so people don't have to select anything or click anything other than the link. So thank you for bringing that into consideration. En español, la manera más fácil de unirse es un.us/join, la cual permite entrar en browser en el navegador, de hecho, de Internet, sin necesidad de usar la aplicación. Megan recomienda el Chrome, generalmente porque es más fácil de entrar. El Firefox y el Internet Explorer es un poco más complicado. Hay manera de entrar, pero generalmente es Chrome lo que se recomienda en Google. También pueden usar el link de abajo de una manera fácil, sin necesidad de entrar a un participant ID, password ni nada de eso, solamente haciendo clic directamente, independientemente si tenga o no la aplicación, puede entrar directamente. Y yeah, thank you.
Okay, so just a reminder, this is where you can find that link. This is something that's great, like Jesus mentioned, to share on your flyers and elsewhere. So you can either send them directly to that link, which will bypass some of the steps, like he said, entering passwords or meeting ID, or you can go straight to that zoom.us/join, and they'll be asked to enter this meeting ID. So what it looks like when they go to zoom.us/join, they'll see this screen right here. And right here is where they're going to enter that 10 or 11-digit meeting ID. They'll enter that and then they'll hit join.
Y así es como se mira la pantalla donde dice join a meeting zoom.us/join. Te va a pedir que pongas la clave de la junta para poder entrar. Se va a mirar de una manera muy similar a hacerla en la aplicación. Sin embargo, no tienes que descargar ninguna aplicación.
So the next thing it's going to prompt them to do, just like on the app, is enter their screen name. So like we said before, first names are usually great. And then they're going to want to check that box that says, I am not a robot, followed by pressing the blue button, join.
And also just here really quickly, when you select another robot, make sure they might prompt you to click pictures. Sometimes I'm not good on doing that, just to make sure you're not a spam or anything, or a bot or anything, you're a real person. So aquí en esta pantalla, al poner el Meeting ID, le va a preguntar el nombre que usted quiera ponerse a sí mismo, su primer nombre o apellido, como dependa de usted. Y abajo va a haber una comprobación de que usted no es un robot o es un ser humano. Entonces tome en cuenta que a veces le va a preguntar hacer clic en diferentes fotos para autentificarse. Cuando termine de hacer eso, puede hacer clic en el botón azul de join.
Okay, so once you click join, it will typically, the first thing that'll come will pop up this box at the top of the screen. And this box is to redirect you to the software. So remember how I said if you already have that or if you want to download that, Zoom really wants you to use their software. It's a great program and it has a lot of functionality. They don't want you to use the browser, so they make it hard to do that. But we want to bypass that. And the way to do that is you're going to hit cancel on this pop-up and you're going to go down to the bottom and hit this blue button that says launch meeting.
En este cuadro azul flotante que se muestra aquí, el link, cuando hace clic en el link aparece una alerta diciendo quiere abrir la aplicación de Zoom.us. Zoom quiere que tengan la aplicación porque pudiese ser más fácil. Sin embargo, si no quiere descargar ninguna aplicación, haga clic como menciona la flecha cancel y después en la segunda flecha inferior va a mostrar launch meeting. Entonces eso significa que puede todavía entrar en el browser. Solo es un paso extra.
So then they're going to make us try to open the browser or open the software again because they really want us to use the software. So we're going to do just like before and hit cancel again, and we'll see the same text at the top where we just clicked launch meeting, but there's a new line that just appeared underneath of it that says if you cannot download or run the application, join from your browser. That is what we want. That's going to be the easiest way to get in, although it tries to stop us.
So, básicamente lo que menciona Megan es que tenemos que intentar 2 veces seguidas para estar seguros que queremos entrar solo en el browser. La segunda vez que haga clic en cancel, a la misma cuadro de diálogo va a mostrar una leyenda en la parte de abajo que dice you can download and run the application. Es decir, si no quiere instalarla, va a una liga azul que tiene que hacer clic join your browser, la cual le va a permitir entrar la tercera es la vencida, entrar de una manera sin la aplicación.
Okay, so now once they've been able to hit join in browser, they should be entering the meeting. And I'm going to show you what that looks like from their perspective. A lot of the times I'm following along on the computer doing everything they're doing just so I could see all of those steps. But if you've got this PowerPoint handy, it's a great way so that you can see what they're seeing. But so now they should be at the point where they are entering the meeting, and we're going to show you what to do once they're in the meeting, how to make sure their audio and video is the way that they want it to be, and how to use the browser controls, which are slightly different from the software controls.
Entonces, básicamente usted está cuando ya pudo entrar después de usar todas esas funciones y poner la información, va a estar en la junta y las personas pueden verlo a menos que tenga su video desactivado. Y también tenga cuidado de no poner voz, o sea, no es que no se ponga voz, pero mute, es decir, apagar su micrófono para evitar que haya ruidos en el fondo y otros asuntos de esa índole. Puede escuchar a todas las personas que tengan el micrófono activado. Ahora, asegúrese que está conectado al audio y aprenda a practicar los controles, es decir, todas las funciones.
Okay, and so just to reiterate what's on this slide as well, this is a great point to say, if your video is turned on where you're running the meeting, which I recommend doing that, now is a great time to say, okay, you should see my face. And this is usually the great revelation moment where the participant will tell me, oh my goodness, I see you. And that's a huge achievement, so congratulate them on that. And then the only downside, like Jesus just mentioned in Spanish, is sometimes if you're on the phone with them, but you're also receiving audio to and from each other's computers, sometimes you'll get a lot of feedback and it'll start ringing and it's terrible. So once they're able to hear you on the computer, I recommend hanging up the phone to avoid some of that, or muting each other on the computer, but then you get in the issue of I can't hear you, the audio is not working just because you're muted. So once you have it working on the computer, hang up the phone and don't have that terrible feedback going.
So, por ejemplo, si usted está marcando, Megan menciona por teléfono, es importante que cuando ya está en la reunión del Zoom, en la computadora, usted cuelgue la llamada para que si ya pudo entrar bien, pueda escuchar a los participantes. Tome en cuenta que va a poder desactivar el micrófono o preguntar para que se activen el micrófono. Ahora, otra cosa que ella recomienda es que, bueno, de hecho, algo muy bueno es, si usted lo pueden ver y usted es el anfitrión del video, pues maravilloso, pero después de eso, obviamente, usted va a tener control sobre las personas que están participando si usted es anfitrión de la llamada.
Okay, so here is what it looks like if you joined a meeting with me. So this is when I'd say, now you can see me. But they're going to tell me, I see you, but I can't hear you. This is typically when we're still on the phone. And that's because they need to click this button down at the bottom that says join audio. It's got a green arrow and a pair of headphones. So usually I direct them to that button, and I'll show you what comes up on the next slide.
Y esta es la parte más importante porque pueden ver Megan en la pantalla. Imaginamos que Megan es la anfitriona. En dado caso, la pueden ver, pero no la pueden escuchar. Entonces, en la flecha blanca menciona Join Audio, que le va a permitir activar sus altavoces y posiblemente también su micrófono. Tienen que hacer clic ahí para empezar la conexión.
So sometimes connecting to audio can be a little difficult. I'm going to show you what those slides look like. But some of the troubleshooting that you might need to go through is if they're on this slide where they hit join by computer audio right here, sometimes it doesn't work immediately. So some of the things that I'll go through with them is I'll say, do you have speakers connected to your computer? Are they turned on? Is your computer volume on? Make sure that they have the controls. It's a lot easier from a laptop, I found. Sometimes desktops usually have those external speakers. You want to make sure those are on and connected. You want to make sure the computer volume is on and connected. And then some of, especially desktops, might not even have a microphone. So they might hear you, but you might not be able to hear them. And so sometimes a workaround for that is if they have a pair of headphones, to plug those into the headphone port, which is usually a hole on the big monitor or on the side of a laptop. Sorry, not the monitor, on the box, you know, that's inside the desktop. But the great headphones that are great are like Apple headphones, if they have any of those, because they have a microphone on them. But not all headphones do. You can try it out, try a couple different things, but it still might not work with computer audio. If that's the case, we've got a solution.
Would you mind going back to the previous slideshow so I can do the Spanish?
To this one here?
That one.
I'm going to go forward to this one again in the English. But...
So, cuando haces clic en Join Audio, vas a encontrar un botón azul que dice Join Audio by Computer, que te permite generalmente acceder a las funciones de audio en la computadora. Muchas veces Megan menciona que no va a funcionar o está retrasado. Si es el caso en que no puedes oír nada después de hacer clic ahí, tienes que contestar las siguientes preguntas o considerarlas. ¿Están tus altavoces activados en la computadora? ¿Está el volumen de la computadora activado en el programa Windows, por ejemplo, o Mac? ¿Está activado? ¿Está la computadora, el micrófono activado, conectado físicamente en un hoyo frontal de la computadora? O también otra forma, tienes headphones básicos que pueden conectarse enfrente de la computadora en line out o speaker out en ese puerto. Si no es así, pues entonces no tendrá que activarse a la opción de llamar por teléfono. Muchas veces los participantes entran en la computadora, no pueden oírlos, no pueden escuchar, pero pueden también hablar por teléfono como alternativa para escuchar o para hablar.
So just to reiterate, right here again is when they first join and they hit that join audio button down in the left-hand corner, and they want to first try by computer, see if it might work, especially if they're using a laptop. Usually we can get that to work pretty well. And if not, use some of those troubleshooting steps we just gave. But if for some reason we can't get them to join by audio, here's the best thing to do otherwise. So we've got the computer audio here on the right-hand side, but we're going to press that phone call button on the left-hand side. And so press that, we're going to see this. Oh. Por
ejemplo, Megan menciona aquí, es un buen ejemplo. Si hace clic en Join Audio y dice, no quiero usar mi computadora, quiero usar mi teléfono, hace clic en la pestaña de arriba, Phone Call, la cual le va a permitir generar la lista de llamadas. La primera, el número 312 que mira ahí, naranja, es la llamada de Chicago. Siempre va a ser el mismo teléfono para todas las llamadas. El Conference ID número 2, en la viñeta número 2, menciona lo que tiene que usar el identificador, y el participante ID lo menciona en la parte de abajo. También puede hacer el símbolo de gato, como habíamos mencionado. Tome en cuenta que a veces, como menciona Megan, lo voy a mencionar en español, es más fácil usar el teléfono inteligente o usar la tableta porque ya tienen el video y el audio integrados, so ya no hay que preocuparse por dispositivos adicionales. So Megan, I'm mentioning, as you can see here, it's easier to use the tablet or the personal smartphone because the audio and video are integrated already, so you don't have to worry about separate pieces of equipment.
Yeah, definitely. If the participant has that tablet or iPhone connected to internet, that would be the best way to join. That's how I recommend most people to do it. But I know so many of my adults or participants, all they might have is their desktop in their home office. So we've been able to get a number of people to join through the computer, but you see there's a lot of steps. So just like I said here, if the computer audio didn't work, the screen that comes up here, it's almost exactly the same as dialing in from a landline or a normal phone. It's going to be the same phone number. I usually recommend they use the 312 number, the Chicago number that's the same as before. They're going to enter the same meeting ID, and they'll see this all on their screen, so you won't have to necessarily give it to them. The only difference is instead of just entering pound when it asks for the participant ID, they can do that, or they can enter this participant ID here, which will link their audio on their phone with the video on the computer as one participant instead of showing up as two different participants. So that's why you might want them to include that participant ID. But again, I know it's a lot of steps. I have successfully been able to teach a few people how to do this, to get the video on the computer, the audio on the phone, and sometimes they hate it, but they might still work with me. But this is the way to do that.
So tome en cuenta en el menú de phone call que está mostrando el número telefónico de acceso local a Chicago 312, pero los demás números también pueden tener acceso. Generalmente se usa el número 312, note el número Conference ID, que es el número de la junta, y el Participant ID lo que va a hacer generalmente es ligar su cuenta de la que usted está llamando con su cuenta existente de Zoom para permitirle usar el audio. Es la función por la cual existe el Participant ID para ligar su voz con su cuenta de Zoom. Megan ha intentado de una manera muy exitosa con algunas personas de utilizar estas funciones, pero no es algo complicado probablemente para una persona que está empezando.
Okay, so now hopefully we've been able to set up their video. We've been able to set up their audio on the computer. So usually at this point, I just want to give them a few tips on how to use those controls that I mentioned before, controlling your video, your mute, there's the chat function, and then they might want to know how to leave the meeting at the end. And so typically I will show them, I'll walk through them on the screen. I did just want to make a note. What you'll see on the slides here might be slightly different than what the participant sees. For example, the screen share button, the record button, unless a participant is a host of a meeting, they shouldn't see most of that. So just ask them what they see and don't always say, oh, it's next to the record button. They might not see that the way you do.
Muy importante, Megan menciona que si usted es el anfitrión de la junta, usted va a tener diferentes botones en la parte inferior del cuadro de diálogo de la aplicación de Zoom. Probablemente tenga record, probablemente chat, share screen, manage participants. Cuando una persona entra y no es un anfitrión, podría haber botones diferentes. Generalmente no tienen record o share screen por cuestiones de seguridad. Una cosa importante es que Megan, I'm going to say this in Spanish, que se den cuenta que tienen el botón de chat en la parte inferior en caso de que tengan problemas técnicos o problemas de conexión. El botón de chat es muy importante porque así el anfitrión puede conectarse con la participante está teniendo problemas. So what I'm saying in English is that make sure your participants know where the chat button is, which is in the bottom of the screen. They can click on it and then do troubleshooting, texting, which is a lot more helpful than trying to speak to the person if the microphone doesn't work.
Yeah, definitely, Jesus. So like I said, some of those buttons that you might see, but they might not see are the manage participants, the share screen, and the record. However, I want to go through some of the controls that will be useful to them and that they will definitely have. And those are going to be the unmute button, the start video button, this chat function over here, like Jesus mentioned, is really great for doing technical troubleshooting, especially if you're in a meeting with 20 people and one participant, instead of having them talk over everyone in the meeting because they can't hear your audio or something, you can kind of have someone maybe help you do that on the side to manage the chat. And then finally the leave button over here. So I typically encourage them, okay, let's turn your audio on and off and talk about times in a meeting where we might want to have everyone quiet so we can avoid feedback, even if the room seems quiet. Then I would teach them how to do the video, which is that button right beside it. Tell them you don't have to have your video on. We can see you if your video is on. If it's got the red line through it, that means it's off. But you can also turn it on if you would like us to see you.
Oh, and also another thing too, if you're a host, you might not be able to see the chat button. You might have to click on more. You see the 3 dots more, and then from the follow-up list, you may have to select chat right there. You might notice it might be blinking orange, which means you got a new message. Okay. Entonces, básicamente, estos botones son importantes, el de Unmute y el de Start Video. Unmute le permite usar su voz, Start Video le permite que otras personas lo vean. A la diagonal roja significa que están desactivados, sin diagonal roja significa que están activados. Otra función importante es Share Screen. El anfitrión se recomienda que desactive la función. So for security settings, if you are the host, you should deactivate access for participants share the screen, unless it's very necessary. El botón de chat también va a aparecer si quiere hacer preguntas. Y el botón de leave a la derecha va a ser si quiere dejar la junta.
Yep, so just all those buttons, that chat button is right here for them. I encourage you when you're on a tutorial with a participant, have them practice sending a message or two back and forth. They can choose whether to send the message to everyone, just to you, to a specific participant. Show them how to go through that functionality with the drop-down bar, and then encourage them to use that if they ever have a question during a meeting.
So el botón del chat, el diálogo en español, significa que ellos pueden comunicarse directamente con usted, con otra persona, o a todas las personas. Entonces, cuando usted presiona chat, va a mostrar un cuadro de diálogo nuevo que va a mostrar chat y va a mostrar los mensajes que van pasando en caso de que alguien los escriba. Y hay un menú inferior que menciona to everyone, to speakers o to la persona que sea. So, enseña a las personas a usarlo en caso de que quieran mandar mensajes personales.
And then finally, once you've wrapped up showing them all the controls and they're ready to learn how to leave the meeting, that's going to be this red button in the bottom right-hand corner. It'll have a second screen that'll come up, are you sure? And they'll say leave the meeting. And so I encourage them to practice that, although I tell them when we end the meeting, you'll get kicked out. So, but it's good for them to know anyway if they have to go or want to turn it off, because otherwise I tell them, you know, we can still see you or hear you if you have that turned on. So you want to make sure that you stop the meeting when you're done.
So, básicamente el botón rojo que menciona, que señala, es para dejar la junta. No necesariamente tienen que dejarla en el momento que les está ayudando, pero recuerden a ellos que la junta se va a terminar y usted la va a terminar. No necesitan hacer ninguna acción, a menos de que quieran dejar la junta por razones de emergencia o otro motivo, pueden usar el botón rojo leave en la parte inferior derecha.
Okay, so like I said, all of those steps are walking through someone who's joining from their browser. It's tough, but it's doable. And I've taught a lot of our senior participants how to do this. If they are someone who is great with technology, they think they'll be joining meetings all the time, or they really want to be able maybe even to host meetings. We love to empower our participants to use this technology with their families, with their friends to connect outside of our programming. If they want to take it a step further, I didn't go super into detail on this because I'm not sure how many people will, and it's also tends to be different based on what kind of computer they're using, but they can sign up for an account. That's pretty straightforward. You're going to go to zoom.us/signup. It's going to ask for a few things like their birthday, their name, and that'll create an account for them so that they can sign in and have their like meeting ID or their name set up, and that way they could host a meeting if they ever want to. Or they can, if they really want to take it a step further, they can download the Zoom software. This is, remember on that screen, I think I included it in the next slide. Yeah, right here, where it comes up, and I'll give you I'll go back in a sec, Jesus. But when it comes up and we said launch meeting to do it from the browser instead, there's a way that they can actually download the program, which makes a lot of this a little bit easier, but it can be a process to getting it downloaded. But if they hit download and run Zoom, it's going to download the software. They're going to have to go through their device settings. So it's unique depending on the kind of computer they have, but it'll usually ask them to save the software and then to install the software. And then they'll have an icon for it. They'll open the icon. This is great for someone who has a little more experience using their computer. I wouldn't recommend this for a beginner. But then they can use that to join meetings in the future instead of going to the website.
Ok, so Megan menciona, quiere tomar un paso más adelante. Es de la siguiente manera. Si usted se encuentra en la necesidad de seguir programas de manera constante y tiene un poco de conocimiento tecnológico de la manera en la que puede entrar en las juntas sin problema alguno o tal vez algún tipo de problemas, pero no son mayores problemas, puede abrir una cuenta de Zoom en zoom.us/sign up, en el cual le va a preguntar su nombre, su email y también su fecha de nacimiento para abrir una cuenta que está ligada a la cuenta de Zoom, en la cual va a tener su nombre, cuando ponga su nombre la primera vez va a estar fijo. So no tiene necesidad de cambiar ese nombre ni nada de eso. Y sus opciones de seguridad o cualquier opciones que tenga activada van a ser fijas, o no tiene que cambiar nada. Y luego, would you mind going to the next screen?
Of course.
Yeah, thank you. So, cuando lance la aplicación, por ejemplo, se ha invitado a una reunión y no sea miembro todavía de Zoom, se acuerda del cuadro de diálogo que aparece diciéndole que abra openzoom.us. Bueno, en la parte de abajo va a mencionar download en run Zoom, lo que significa que puede descargar y correr Zoom, para lo cual se va a abrir la aplicación y cuando esté en la aplicación inicial va a mencionar sign in o sign up y el botón de sign up para abrir su cuenta. So I'm mentioning in Spanish, Megan, when they have the Zoom app, it's going to have a button that says sign up in there that is going to tell them the steps that you're mentioning.
Yeah, so that's when you're going to need that account. So I try to make everything go sequentially. So first you're going to want the account, then you can download this, really building on all the previous steps in order of complexity.
And quick thinking, I don't want to advertise Zoom, but the free account allows you only to have 40 minutes if you want to be the host, whereas you have to pay $14.99, I believe, to have unlimited minutes. So básicamente usted, si quiere ser un anfitrión, como Megan menciona, lo puede hacer con una cuenta gratis. Tome en cuenta que solo hay 40 minutos de la llamada y si contrata Zoom mensualmente por $14.99, no es un comercial, pero tenemos que dejárselo saber, es llamadas ilimitadas. Puede ser anfitrión por muchas horas. Thanks, Megan.
Okay, so now that they've gone through whatever step they might have done, whether it was joining from the phone, joining from the tablet or smartphone, or joining from the computer, sometimes they've done it once, they said, oh, that's great, it worked, and then they forget everything. So usually before I wrap up with the client, with the participant, I'll say, okay, great. Now, why don't I stay quiet on the phone, or we're gonna hang up and you're gonna dial in, and let's see if everything we just did works. They might have written down the steps somewhere, but we want to make sure that they can do this without your help, because that's how they'll eventually be joining the meeting. So maybe have them do that 1 or 2 times until they feel comfortable.
So, el paso más importante para cerciorarse que estén listos para usar las reuniones cuando se está yendo a entrenamiento con los participantes es asegurarse que puedan seguir la junta varias veces, pedirles que salgan de la junta y regresen. Generalmente la gente anota las instrucciones en un papel y por eso hay que cerciorarse que las tienen bien anotadas, haciendo práctica. Cuando está completo se asegura que tienen el tiempo y la fecha de los programas y el meeting ID. Por ejemplo, Megan, I'm mentioning, for example, you are a host and you have a workshop, making sure they have the dates and they have the IDs and the phone number to connect is important. So asegúrese que si usted es anfitrión de la junta, sus personas que quieran participar tengan el ID de la junta, tengan el participant ID, es opcional, y tengan las fechas y el número de teléfono.
Yeah, definitely making sure before you end up, before you wrap up your session, Don't leave them without giving that to them. Make sure they write it down, or you can text it to them. I love emailing it to those who use email, making sure it's somewhere that when it's next Tuesday and it's time for the meeting, and I'm trying to get everyone else on, they're not going to be calling me saying, I lost the ID, or is it the right time, or something like that. Although that does happen, and we're happy to help them, doing our best to make sure they have that information.
Sí, igual Megan está verificando que las personas realmente no olviden la información, tengan la información, pero a veces pasa. Pero asegurándose que antes de que termine su junta de usted, comparte la información de la siguiente junta, asegura que entiendan las instrucciones.
So usually this process, depending on how the participant is joining, whether they're joining from the phone, that might just take you even less than 10 minutes to show them how to put in that participant ID and practice that a few times. Some of the longest ones I've done have been upwards of 30 minutes, and that's if they're trying to join from a browser, if something's extra complicated, if they really don't understand much about using their computer, they're not familiar with it, maybe allow upwards of 30 minutes. But typically 10 to 30 is on average what it takes for me to teach a new participant how to use Zoom.
La manera más fácil es entrar por teléfono y puede llevar tutoría alrededor de 10 minutos. La manera más complicada son las tabletas y la computadora puede llevar alrededor de 30 minutos porque hay más pasos y depende de la habilidad tecnológica que tengan las personas y cómo se sientan para usar el sistema.
And then I just want to give you a couple tips in walking through this. I've learned so much. I started doing this back in, I believe it was around June. We started recruiting our participants and teaching them how to use the software. And just a few tips on going through this. We really want to go through this slowly, ensure that they understand, and be supportive. We know that this is a huge adjustment, and we want to help everyone to transition and learn something new as best we can.
Megan menciona, tome su tiempo, muy importante, hacer la transición de reuniones cara a cara en la comunidad físicamente a reuniones virtuales donde tal vez no haya contacto físico. Puede ser un ajuste muy importante y un compromiso muy importante en la comunidad porque tienen que aprender cosas nuevas. O siempre ofrézcale soporte y apoyo a esas personas, incluyendo las reuniones individuales para asegurarse que están teniendo un proceso muy exitoso. Megan en enero empezó a reclutar a las personas con tecnología, lo cual asegura que sientan que están siendo apoyadas.
And so ultimately what we want this to be is an empowering experience for the participant, for the client. We know that this can be really frustrating for some. And like I said in the beginning, they might hear the word virtual program and immediately feel excluded, immediately have that aversion. But we really want to kind of allow for that frame shift and some of the ways that we can do that in order to empower the participant is make sure that we are moving slowly, like I said on the slide before, speaking at the right level for the client. You know, if they have a good technological understanding, we don't want to make assumptions, but we don't want to treat them as if they've never used a computer before. However, some people might be in that that category who really don't understand much about using a computer. I remember one of the first introductions I did, I told them, okay, now let's search for zoom.us. And they said, search where? And I said, well, let's search in your browser. And they said, what is my browser? So we want to make sure that we are using the appropriate level and trying to gauge where they're at. A few other just tips for working through this is trying to be as positive as we can. They might be talking so much about how they hate trying to go to church online or do everything over the phone. And we know it's not what we prefer for the most part, but it does have its benefits. And I really encourage you to have the participant focus on these benefits. And then finally, one thing that's always helped, I don't want to tell them other people can do it, so can you, but to encourage them that, you know, we've been able to help a lot of people who were in your situation, who didn't understand this technology. They've been able to successfully learn how to use Zoom, and they're joining our meetings. And we know it's difficult, but it's not impossible. So we want to empower them with that information.
Megan menciona conceptos muy importantes. La tecnología puede ser una herramienta muy poderosa, pero también puede ser muy frustrante para las personas dependiendo del nivel de actitud que ellas tengan para usar la tecnología. Recuerde moverse muy lentamente y hablar al nivel de conocimiento que sea apropiado a la persona, ¿verdad? Sea positivo, use ideas positivas acerca de por qué a veces las reuniones virtuales son mejores a las reuniones físicas. Tiene beneficios, podría tener desventajas, pero concéntrese en los beneficios. Recuerde que otros participantes tal vez puedan ser más rápidos usándolo, otros no. También recuerden el mensaje a las personas que es importante conocer las barreras, pero recuérdeles que se han ayudado a otras personas, que usted ha apoyado a varias personas y que usted puede ofrecer ese apoyo a estas personas aun si no lo han intentado o es imposible.
And so finally, I know I didn't do much of an introduction in the beginning, but I can't finish this presentation without giving a little bit of a plug for my organization and for the work that we're doing. I am a fellow who's working with the Quinn Center for the 2020-2021 year. I'm specifically working in our adult and senior programming. And I just wanted to give you an example of some of the things that we are hosting on the next slide, but Jesus, I'll let you go first.
I'm going to do this in Spanish. So, Megan se graduó recientemente y está haciendo un internado de servicio social con Quinn Center de San Eulalia, ayudando a las personas de la tercera edad con conocimientos y habilidades tecnológicas para conectarlos con tecnología. Megan va a presentar en la siguiente diapositiva ejemplos de lo que está haciendo. Okay.
So I don't know whether or not your organizations might already be offering virtual programs, or if you'd like to refer any participants, we're always looking for more to join us over at the Quinn Center. On the left side of the screen, you'll see, I'm sorry, this one is in Spanish, but Jesus, I'll let you take it away in a second. This is our English learning program that we've recently started. For Spanish-speaking community members. We meet 1 to 2 times a month. The next meeting is actually going to be on Tuesday. All the information is on our website, and there's also registration there. And I encourage you to refer any participants who might be interested. Or then here on the left, you see our weekly seniors programming. This is going on every Thursday, including tonight. We're going to be hosting our creative conversations. We have strength training, we have Zumba, we have yoga. There's a lot of fun stuff going on there. So I encourage any of your participants, if they might be interested, to get involved here. But I also just wanted to show you how we set up our flyers. We want to make sure that we have some important information, whether it's referring them to the website and having all the information there, or you'll see I have the 312 phone number, the meeting ID, the time of the meeting. I remind them how the different ways that they can join with their phone, with their smartphone or tablet, on the computer. I've made a shortened version of the link to make it a little easier to type in. And the same over here with that phone number, ID, and link to join.
So, estas son las diferentes sesiones que Megan está teniendo, inglés y español. Obviamente la parte izquierda menciona clases de inglés conversacional gratuita, que significa que si usted quiere aprender más idioma inglés, va a tener oportunidad de usarlo virtualmente de una manera muy positiva sin dejar su casa. Esto se recomienda para personas mayores o cualquier persona en la comunidad, de hecho. Se encuentran las instrucciones de manera telefónica y usando su tableta o computadora en la parte inferior. También, si usted es anfitrión de una junta, tome en cuenta la manera en que Megan puso la información con un link muy corto. Bit.ly es un sistema en el que puede hacer usted ligas cortas sin costo alguno. También tome en cuenta la información de la organización en la parte inferior en caso de que hayan dudas tecnológicas o problemas. En la parte derecha, clases en inglés para las personas de tercera edad de manera virtual, el horario de octubre, las llamadas, no porque esté en inglés significa que no pueda participar. Hay diferentes habilidades como yoga, hay reuniones de trivia, por ejemplo, la noche de Zumba. De Zumba es muy importante para que usted se mantenga activo físicamente. Y también de strength, que significa de dureza física, ejercicios que pudieran usar habilidades básicas. Igualmente en la parte de abajo menciona el teléfono y menciona el meeting ID que habíamos mencionado para seguir. O si no, también Megan, como puso el link como yo, en mis llamadas pone el link aquí directamente. Puede hacer clic y no le pregunta nada y abre la aplicación. Thank you.
And then finally at the bottom, you'll see my phone number and my email are on here. I know that this might have been a lot. If you have any specific questions, maybe for those who are watching the recording, feel free to reach out and I'll try and help you troubleshoot as best you can. I would love to do that. And with that, I think we'll move forward and see if we have any questions.
Megan, I think that putting the contact and phone number and perhaps the email is something that I have not tried. I will try that. I'll put the email. So in case people have issues with, because I know they have issues, this is something new that I learned, so I'm gonna implement that.
Yeah, definitely. Did anyone who was on this call today, I know we won't be able to necessarily take questions from those who are watching the recording, but was there anything that I should go back and clarify for you all?
I think you touched on everything, Megan. Thanks so much for this thorough and detailed presentation. I think it'll be helpful for sure for a lot of folks. So I am glad that we were able to do this.
Of course, I'm going to share just one more time in the chat the slides so that when we get this out to everyone, they can go through these slides because hopefully there'll be a resource that they can use again and again as they're walking through this with a participant. And any other questions, you can call me, text me, or email me, and I'm happy to do my best and help you out.
Great. Thanks so much. I will get the recording and the link to the slides out to all of our CTLV and Faith Cares partners, and then I think they'll be very appreciative. So thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you guys for being here.
Yeah. All right. Have a good rest of your day, Megan.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you, Megan, again.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.